Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast, where today we have a very special guest, Charlie Garforth, who I actually met through UKUP. We both judge for them, competed with them, and so have you, Charlie. And we both agree, actually, when we talk, it's really nice because they sort of catapulted us into successful bodybuilding careers. So it's really nice to have that and resonate with that. And then recently we've seen each other at shows and things. So I thought it'd be really cool to reach out and get you on the pod. So thank you, first of all.
Thank you.
It's super cool as well because we're both very transparent about PED use, which is what we'll speak about today, and competition prep. And we're both very passionate about bodybuilding and also the safer use model because, you know, in this world, it can be, I guess, a lot of mixed messages. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting you say about me being open about talking about PED use because actually, up until very recently, I wasn't. So up until very recently, I didn't talk very much about it in an open forum. I would talk to my clients about it and I would go into that length, but I wouldn't talk about it in an open forum. But the problem is, I think the industry and social media has changed very much, and there's a lot more emphasis on PED use. And the dosages are getting higher and higher. They're using more aggressive and more dangerous protocols, which means that I then in turn feel like I need to talk more openly about it in order to combat that. Because there's a safe way of going about it, or a safer way of going about it. And I think it's important people understand that to stop them making mistakes that could last the rest of their lives. So that's why I'm a little bit more open. Obviously, I've been coaching for 7 years now. For a long time, it was a private part of it. And as long as you're not saying openly that you're natural when you're not, it's nobody else's business. But so much is said now, and you see so much damage being done and people dying, like literally dying.
Yeah.
I think the education needs to be more openly talked about so that, you know, it's combated in some way.
Yeah, for sure. And that's part of the reason why when I launched into going onto the podcast platform earlier this year, I spoke to Joe about it, who's been on the pod a few times, and he's really, really keen to get information out to especially female competitors because more female than male, I think it's that grey area. And I personally find, because I've been completely open and honest about it, but I find that there's a lot of females that don't want to almost admit that they're maybe using PEDs or that they're interested because who are they going to ask? And then once they've asked the question, they feel like, oh, I don't know if that's going to go any further. And it can sort of cast a shadow in their mind as to their competitive career because obviously things get thrown about within the industry.
Absolutely. And that's also the reason why I've actually been a bit not talked openly in the public forum about PED use, because obviously you don't want that implication that if a coach is talking about PED use, that means all of their clients are using it, which is very much not the case. Like it's a person dependent thing. And some of my most successful clients have beaten people who are using PEDs whilst not using them themselves. And you don't want people to then assume that that person is using it. So, but like I said, it's become so prevalent now. I think it's important to make sure that it's talked about in order to sort of reduce the harm. Because yeah, like you say, I mean, there's a balance. I think the dangers with guys is literally people are dying. So when you take, and they're certainly shortening their lives. So whereas with girls, obviously, it's much quicker and easier to get negative side effects. So it's on a more wide scale. But whether those side effects are as damaging, well, who knows? But it's happening on a wider scale. Female PEDs use is now, you know, vast, and the masculinization of virilization side of things happens quick. You know, it can be like that. And if people aren't aware of the side effects and how to monitor it, then there's a problem.
Yeah, for sure. And something we touched on in regards to the masculinization and virilization is that, you know, once you've gone too far, it's not something you can start reversing. So another thing of the awareness was trying to inform people that, you know, once that process takes place, you can't then go backwards. And if you're, you know, jumping up on how much gear you're taking and you're taking the wrong doses too much, etc., etc. I mean, if you're informed and that's the route you want to take, I've always said, you know, everyone makes their own decisions and that's personal to them, but you want the information to be able to then make your decision rather than, you know, you hear horror stories of people just getting hold of a pot of pills and taking, you know, however much the gym person sells it to them for and tells them, you know, take this, and they just take it without the information.
Yeah, I've heard of coaches giving their clients it, and they don't even use the name. They call them hardness, and it's like, oh, just the final X amount of weeks, we're going to add in the hardness. And we're talking about females here, and it's like, you don't even know what you're taking. And that's infuriating for coaches. We're pretty widely known. I'm not going to mention any names, but a few years ago, this was a very widely known coach who was giving it to lots of girls and just calling it hardness. And that was shocking. There has to be the education. So it's, yes, people make their own decisions, but it has to be an educated decision and an informed decision.
Yeah, for sure. And also, touching on whether you go down the oral route or whether the safer use model using a multitude of compounds at a smaller amount, again, there's that sort of grey area where I find that a lot of females in particular, the route of injectables scares the life out of them. And I said on the first pod, when I spoke to Joe about it, the first thing that worried me was, how am I going to tell my mum about this? And then, like the worry of injecting, and then when you understand actually that is a safer use model to use a mixture of compounds at a lower dose, and you've got different pathways being used, I guess for me, it was facilitating that I'm learning at the same time, and that was the best route to go down. But there's a lot of oral use and the dosage can be very high.
I think the problem is people aren't patient enough. And I think it's important to realize, for instance, I was lifting weights for about 20 years before I ever stepped on stage, right? And through that time, I was natural. I competed as a natural powerlifter, and that's important to recognize. And in fact, my first competitions, all I did was a little bit of Klein and Anabar, and I added them in just in the last 8 weeks or so. Purely, like, I wasn't even planning to compete, until it was the last minute decision, and I just added them in at the end. And that's, and I think people expect to jump on stage within 6 months to get a coach. I've got this high profile coach to get lots of winners. I'm going to get a coach and jump on stage. And I think that's disrespectful almost to the people who've been working at this for years, right? And, PEDs are a definite option, and they absolutely 100% work. They are effective, but there is so much more you can do before you go down that route. And that's the thing, you have to ask yourself, are you meticulous with your nutrition? Are you meticulous with your recovery? Are you meticulous with your training? Are you training truly intensively? Have you been through a consistent phase for minimum of 2 years, I would say, before you look at the option of PEDs? Because you can achieve so much without them. And the problem is, after the time, there's a lot of people, I think there's probably more people using PEDs that don't compete than do. And it's so widely used that people go down the option way, way too fast. And there's people that don't look like they're using gear that are. And it's shocking the amount of people who use it. And the thing is, they're not even getting that much response, because if you are not sending a stimulus to that muscle to grow and create the right environment with calorie surplus and things to grow, then adding anabolics is not going to change that. You're still not sending a signal to the muscle to grow in past that initial phase. And that's the problem. They might tighten up and they might harden up a little bit, but it's still not going to get the results they would have got if they'd have just been consistent with everything else for a period of time before they went down that path. And then again, with safe use model, you can go through non-androgenic options way earlier, right? But the problem is, when somebody comes to a coach and they want to compete in 6 months. Right? And so then how much time have you got? Because so then they're not patient enough to then go on the safer use model for a period of time and get some results from that before you finally then add in a building phase with androgenics, before then having some time off, and then again later on down the line doing a cut with some androgenics. So you can see that straight away this process should be fairly long to get maximum results. And the problem is, people don't do that. They have to get on stage the first time, realize they've got way too little muscle, and then they start trying to do things the correct way. And actually, it's still a couple of years process to get from where they are to where they want to be. They're just, they're getting on stage in the meantime and not doing very well. And I think it's our job as coaches to be realistic with people and say, this is the time scale it takes. Even years ago when I started coaching and everybody was doing, here's an 8-week package, here's a 6-week package. And I, from the very beginning, said, I will not do 8-week cuts. I will not do 12-week cuts. Like, you come into me for a minimum of 6 months. And that was like, took a bit of strength back then to actually do. And now actually most people are doing that, and it's a way better way of doing it. You've got to do an off season together before you go into a cutting phase. Yeah. And, that ties in with the timescales involved. Got to be realistic, they expect to get a coach, go on PDs and win a show. And it's like, no. I mean, it can be done because there's too many shows these days and they're not being on the stage sometimes, but it's not the best you can be.
Yeah, I love that you said that about being meticulous with your nutrition, training, recovery as well, because it also adds that substance into your journey. I found that, you know, being natural first and then going down the assisted route, but having competed several times before that, you know, I was able to see where I was able to fare naturally. I was able to get the discipline, the commitment, understand what it took to get to stage, and then be able to sort of evolve my journey. And I think that, you know, like you say there with nutrition and training in particular, people aren't like us, you know, they miss a day or they don't do this and they don't do that. And when I'm competing, and I know you're the same, you know, when you're in a prep, for me, it's everything is absolutely nailed to the letter. And that's, I feel, how it should be. But, you know, again, because like you say, there's not many people on stage sometimes, and it's very open to anyone to do. I think sometimes it casts that sort of, oh yeah, I'll just be a bodybuilder.
Yeah, and that's the thing. 'Cause it's become a cool thing now. When I first competed, there was only one other guy in my town who'd competed at that sort of time, and now it's like every gym's got a few people. You know, like it's such a widespread thing. And rather than people thinking I'm going to start a journey in bodybuilding, people are just thinking, oh, I'm going to do one show and I want to get a trophy and tick that box, a bit like they do a half marathon or something. And they want to do it the shortest possible time, easiest show they can do. And that's not for me, you know. Like, I take people on who want to be in this for the long game, and they want, you know, it is a journey. It's not like, if you think of some of the best bodybuilders that you can think of, you know, on the Olympia stage, nobody knows how they did on the first show or the second show. Who cares? It's just a mark in the sand that you then progress from. And if you think about it in those terms, then you're far more likely to try and do things either starting off without any gear or starting doing your first show on absolute minimal gear. You know, it's the same with the guys, and they're doing the first show and they've added every compound in. They've added, you know, all the fat burners or everything you can possibly imagine. Everything's gone into that first show. And if you actually think of your first show as like, how much can I get away with not using? So the least you can, you know, do well with, it gives yourself a longer career. Whereas, and I think probably some of the problem comes down to coaches as well, because coaches want to get that client as high level as possible in as short a time period as possible. So they are throwing every single compound at that client, which then means that, yeah, that client's a first-time competitor and they look amazing, but the journey for that client is far lower. So if somebody's saying they literally want to jump on the Olympian stage, well, it's far less likely to happen if you've used all of the tools in your toolbox right at the beginning of that journey. So I'm not against gear. I just think you have to be totally understanding of the effects that's going to have. So with a guy, this will shorten your life. 100%. You know, this will have no negative effects. You are going to have to monitor things like your blood glucose levels, your cholesterol. You have to do fingerprint pricks. You have to do all of these things. So once you make that decision, you are informed and you can make that decision. I have nothing against it. Like, if somebody wants to jump on the Olympia stage and they're willing to knock 10 years off their life, you go, man. You know what I mean? Amazing. And a bit like with the girls, who might just say that an enlarged clitoris is a bad thing. She doesn't give a fuck. If she wants to go to the Olympia, then go, girl. You know what I mean? Like, but they just have to know. They might not care if their voice is a bit deeper. They've got a few of those side effects. It's like, I don't care. I want to be on that stage and I want to do well. The problem comes when you've got like 18-year-old girls, 19-year-old girls making decisions that could affect them 20, 30 years down the line. Now, an 18 or 19-year-old girl is very unlikely to have that vision into the future of what their life might look like at that point. And then making decisions that could genuinely affect that. That's when it's a little bit more dodgy. But again, if they make that informed decision, you know, who are we to argue? You just have to make sure the education's there. That's why my education lab has like 8 in-depth videos taking them through that process of understanding, you know, where you should be first, understanding, you know, because people throw around phrases like anabolic to androgenic ratios, and people nod their heads, but most of them don't understand what those two words mean. You know, like it's like, you know, and it's I see it all the time. They're like, okay, yeah, I understand. Yeah, that's fine. I love it. You know, so you have to break it down really simply for people, and then they make that decision. You know, and you know, good for them. Yeah, it's a fun journey. You just have to be well informed when you do it, and you have to utilize every tool in the toolbox at the right point.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, like you say there about the younger age, there's a lot of, you know, within gym environments, I found that sort of younger girls and groups of people, they can get sort of cheerleaders coming in and saying, oh, you'd be really good at competing. And, you know, I get it myself, and my other half, Matt, you know, people say to him, oh, do you compete? Because he's quite big, but he knows if he's going to compete in the category he wants to compete in, he needs to be bigger. But in sort of gem pop life, as it were, people think, my God, you're massive. But he knows to be competitive, he needs to be much bigger. And it's like that whole sort of I guess people around you empower you and give you sort of false expectations sometimes. If you're then going to go into, you know, say you're going into two bros, or, you know, the big federations, and you've just come from a gym and your friendship group have said you look really good, it can be quite a shell shock.
Yeah, totally. And that peer pressure is a thing as well. You see it with people outside that environment. People do a few shows and their coach and their friends and stuff are saying, you could turn pro, you could do this, that, and the other. And they get sucked up into that. And the next thing, they feel the pressure to do everything they could possibly do to get that.
Yeah.
And really, they shouldn't be rushing that journey. You know, the people who do the best and have the most longevity in the sport are the people who take the time. You know, the truly successful heavyweight bodybuilders in this country have taken a long time to do it. Look at Josh Mallet. You know, how long has it taken him? And look at his start point. You know, he's taken his time, and that's why everyone's behind him. You know, that's everyone's cheering him on, because they know how hard he had to work for that.
Yeah, it really does give that authenticity to your journey. And especially him, you know, actually when I got my makeup done at the last show, all of the girls, they're not bodybuilders, but they know who he is, and they were like, he's so, like, he's massive, he's so cool. And I'm like, yeah, he is. And you know, when you understand the story behind it, and I think, I don't know about you when you first won a competition, but the first one that I did win, it was so cathartic, and like this whole emotion, it just took over my whole body. And it's because, you know, I'd had like 5 years had gone into that.
Yeah,
And
totally.
it's mental.
Yeah, and that's the thing, you know, it's sometimes, if you, like, my first show was probably one of my least emotional ones, because I ended it 6 weeks out. I just looked pretty good anyway, you know what I mean? I was in
Love
I was
it.
in the nutrition game and stuff anyway. I went almost expecting to win, and I did win. And you know, it was only when I had a few, like, where I didn't get the result I wanted, then, you know, you kind of get more emotion out of it. And then, you know, I had, like, and then when probably the most emotional one was when I had a sponsor who paid for a trip to America, hotels, flights, all that sort of stuff, to get my pro card with WBFF, which at that point was bigger than it is now. And it was sort of a bigger federation. I stood on stage waiting for the announcement, and it's only then that I let the pressure and the realization come to me how many people have invested in this, as well as just me, like sponsors and stuff.
Yeah.
And that I'd done it. And then you start getting a little bit tearful, because that decision mattered. You know, whereas, you know, I block out emotions.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
How long were you competing for? Because you've sort of stepped away from stage, as it were, at the moment, haven't you?
Yeah, well, this is one of the things I try and say to my clients, is I kind of rushed that journey a little bit, because I was only competing from 2015 through to 2017.
Okay.
And I did I did 9 shows in that time, which is relatively a lot, because I was winning, you know, so I just kept on going. And I had the shape and the size, and it was just fine adjustments. But I was winning most of the shows of the federations that were around at the time, because that was back in the days of UK VFF. So there wasn't things like PCA around. So I did everything but UK VFF. And I did well in them. But the thing is that because I rushed that journey to the very top level I could get to, which was pretty high, it was a WBFF World, I stood on next to, you know, William Stallone and people like that. But they're 6'2" with a 25-inch waist, and no matter what I do, I'm never going to be that guy. So that was the level I got to. I was never going to beat those top guys. So that was it. That was me done. So that's why I say to people, like, don't rush it. Like, I see people all the time, they go straight to 2 bros. And it's like, you're not at 2 bros level. You've got nothing there to tell you at that level. So if you're a girl and you haven't got glute tires, why not do some of the lower federations, UK, UP, that sort of stuff? Have a look at yourself. It's way cheaper to get on stage. You're far more likely to get a trophy, so you're going to enjoy the experience. The people backstage are more friendly. You know, the higher the level of the show, the less friendly the people are. I'm sorry that it's true. So you're going to enjoy the experience. You're going to enjoy it, and you nurture the athlete and that journey as they go along. So I believe in putting them in the right show for the right client at the right time, and then you progress them up. So they do use something like UK, UP, and it's like, okay, we've got some great foundations there. Let's take them up to PCA. And, you know, and then from there, it's like, okay, we've done well there. I think we're ready to go to 2 bros. And if you follow that process, you can take a few years at it, and it would probably take that, someone who does 2 bros for the first time anyway, that long anyway. Now, if somebody, you know, someone, if they're walking around and they're 6 weeks out, they've got glute tires, they've got all the rest of it there, symmetry's perfect, then yeah, fuck it, go in as high as you want. You know what I mean? But, like, you know, I think in nurturing the athlete, and I think people are too loyal to a particular federation. And it means that their clients don't necessarily get the best for them. You know, they've got 40 clients in one show. It's like, they just put you in that same as everybody else. They've not thought, what is the perfect show for this person at that time? You know, so that's why, and I think just lengthen the journey, because often people who are competing, they're PTs and stuff anyway. So each time you do a prep, you know, your followers are following it. They enjoy the process of watching you go to the stage. Win, lose, or draw sometimes doesn't make a difference because they're following your journey. That you're gaining the respect and you're passing on lessons. So you don't actually have to, you don't have to rush this process. Do as many as you can.
Yeah. Do you know what as well? I met one of your clients, Patricia, at a show. Oh, she's sound, like we hit it off straight away. And that's the type of attitude that I love. And I love meeting other competitors that, you know, for a start, having a bit of fun on the day. You know, it doesn't have to be go into war mentality and everyone giving you stern faces. First show I did, I turned up and I thought, I don't think I should be here. Everyone's looking at me like, you know, I was this like bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, so excited for my first show. And I actually left feeling very deflated because of the atmosphere and the vibe. And then you go to shows like UKUP, or there's NFM UK, and then there's FitX. This is where I met Patricia. And the vibe is so good. And you just enjoy your day so much. And you think, actually, that 6 months of prep that you've put in, to have such a good day, you leave feeling so good.
Yeah, enjoying the day is so important, and that's why you've got to choose federation. And all those federations I love, by the way, FitX, NFM UK. I know the guys that run them, and they are genuinely great shows. And I think it's good that we've got more shows. I want more options for people. Back in the day, people used to have a season, and I think having 2 or 3 shows to do in each prep is a great idea, so you can fine tune that process and see where you fit, where you enjoy the most, and you've got to make sure you enjoy it. And yes, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love when my clients win, and 9 times out of 10 they either win or come very close to that, because we're meticulous with the process. But win, lose, or draw, often the lesson is the same. Most athletes and coaches should be able to look at something you brought to the stage, and no matter what the result is, that lesson is not changed, because you should know whether you need more muscle in certain areas, better condition, when you could have been more meticulous in the prep. So right up to that moment you walk on stage, you should already know what the game plan is.
Yeah.
The only caveat to that is maybe if you're going to get a pro card or qualify for some finals or something like that, that does change it. But other than that, you should already know, your coach should know, and you should know enough about that category, that criteria, what you have to improve for next time. I'm sure you're going to walk on stage again soon. You already know what you have to change. So whether it's a bulk or a cut or whatever it is you need to do, you know that already. So, that's the case of where stepping on stage is the reward, but you've learned the lessons already.
Yeah. And I love that, because it's just bringing so much to it, because a lot of the time, you do hear bashing around, especially at the tail end of a prep. A lot of people around me, they're saying, I just want this to be over. Can't wait to eat after. Can't wait to, get the competition out of the way. And it's something I always hit home so much with clients on here, as much as possible. Even people around me, if people say, oh, is it hard? I'm like, it is, but I know that it's, meant to be hard at this point, and I never want to almost slag off bodybuilding. But I also try and say to people, focus on the day. Food is always going to be there. The things you're going to do after the show is always going to be there. You only get this one shot, and you might only be on stage for 10 minutes. Yeah.
It baffles me when you see people stashing sweets and chocolates and stuff for weeks in advance. I'm like, you're focusing on the wrong thing. Now put aside the food focus and the likelihood of binging. That's one subject we could talk for an hour about.
Yeah.
Put that aside. If you're not focusing on a trophy, there's something wrong. If you're not focusing on how excited you are to jump on stage, there is something wrong. You're not going to perform as well as the person who's looking past the show. You see it on people's faces when they've had possibly a too hard of a prep, and they stood at the back of the line, because it baffles me. Sometimes people are on stage for 20 minutes, or longer. I've seen people on stage for half an hour in one category, because it's a big category. It's a very hard decision to be made. And you should fight harder and harder and harder along that category goes on, because what it means is that decision is hard and the decision has not been made. If the decision has not been made and they're still scrutinizing you, you should be working your fucking ass off.
Yeah, for sure.
Yourself, people crumble. And it's like, why are you not fighting harder now than you were at the beginning? Because but they just lose their heart, don't they? And it's like, that can be the difference between placing and not placing, fighting for that position. And, you know, that's when people love it, and see someone with a bit of spirit continuing to work their ass off. You get moved to the side of the stage, but they keep working, and they go move to the back into the middle. Like, that's what I love about the sport. How big are your balls? You know, so
Yeah.
and so I say to my clients, you keep fucking working.
Yeah.
And but that's the key. But so I think the problem is sometimes people do preps that are too hard, and PEDs come into this as well, because quite often people are relying on PED use, and then they're going too far into the calorie deficit and relying on the PED use to maintain the muscle. And you literally hear people saying it, don't worry, you're not losing your muscle because you're on PEDs. And there's guys that are big, like bodybuilders, open class bodybuilders on 1,200 calories a day, relying on the PEDs to maintain the muscle, when actually the problem is, like you said earlier about natural athletes, if you start off you know, as a natural athlete and you follow a meticulous process, you can see, you know, how much of a calorie deficit you need in order to drop a certain amount of body fat. The same applies with a coach. If a coach doesn't know how to prep a natural athlete and bring body fat off that person in a safe and natural way without losing muscle, if they go straight in with using heavy amounts of gear, then yeah, you can use 1,000 calories on a guy, and the gear will protect the muscle, but it's going to put a lot of stress on the body. It's going to cause a lot of negative effects, not just because of the volume of PEDs that needs to be used, but because of the size of the deficit and stress on the body. People having to be pulled out of shows because their bodies are just shutting down because of the level of stress on that body. So if you use a safer amount of PEDs and just a small calorie deficit and take the length of time you need, it's far less stress on the body, and it gives that person a longer career as well.
Yeah, I definitely try and promote, you know, there is some cases where people do shorter preps, but generally, as a general rule of thumb, you know, it's always trying to give more time, if anything, than less, because there's nothing worse than when you get closer to a show and you're thinking, shit, I'm not in condition, and you've put that date in the diary, you've booked the show, and you're not ready because it's so stressful. And then if you, like you say, if you've got to bring the deficit really, really deep, I actually find running lower into the two, but when I competed in two bros earlier in the year, they're looking for pretty skinned girls, and the deficit I was running was pretty severe. And I was, you know, a few days out, I was thinking, how am I even going to like perform on stage, because I was so fucked. And it's hard. Like, I think people underestimating the posing element is quite common, and maybe not practicing enough. And then, you know, when you're on stage, I actually was on stage once for 45 minutes, and honestly, I got backstage, and mainly my lower back from obviously the glute poses we have to do, but my back was ripping. And now that almost solidified in my mind, like the minimum I'll do is like 20 minutes of rounds, just to get that sort of posing fitness, as it were.
It's conditioning. You've got to build the conditioning in your body to be able to go into those poses for a period of time. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely.
Is it something that you sort of schedule in with your clients to do on a week?
Literally right at the bottom of the check-in. At the bottom of the check-in, it says, you know, specific targets, and one of those is 20 minutes posing every day. Yeah. And they have to report back to me whether they've hit that. In the same way as we monitor steps, and they report steps back, they report the posing back as well.
Yeah, I think it's such a good thing to be accountable for, because, you know, also when you look at a day in prep and you think, Christ, I've got to do food prep, eat the food, training, steps, whatever else you've got to do, and the posing, you know, sometimes it's like, it's hard not to feel negative about some of those elements when you really are, you know, especially in the tail end of a prep. But actually, you know, if you're doing your posing fatigued, when you get to show day and hopefully you've been able to have a peak and actually you're feeling a little bit better, you've got the adrenaline of the show and everything else. Actually, if you've practiced when you're fatigued, I've found that I can hold my own on the stage for the whole time, and it's a really fulfilling feeling for me. Like, I feel, I can still, like you say, fight. Whereas, you know, if it gets 10 minutes in and you're blowing out your ass, and we've actually seen it in front of us on stage when we've judged together, the night and day difference.
Oh, totally. Because posing wins shows, you know, I don't believe that the best posing, I don't believe in scoring somebody for their posing, but the posing should bring your physique to be shown the best. So it's a best display of your physique. So whilst, you know, I'm not necessarily saying, no, their posing's 10 out of 10, their physique looks better because of it. You know, it's as simple as that. You want to reduce your waist size, you can either do it in the gym, dropping body fat, and once you pass a certain level, you can't do it anymore. Or you can just learn to contract your transverse abdominals and really hit vacuums and stuff, and make sure that that is a tight waist. You know, so that is a much more realistic way of doing it. And I think that's also a lesson of why it's so important to do your posing in the off season and as you come into a prep, because I think too many people think I'll do my posing as this show gets closer, but you have to realize how tough it is at that point, both with regards to your energy levels and, you know, time, how much time you've got in a day. So whilst you might not look great, you know, however many weeks out, and it's not motivating to stand in front of the mirror and do posing when you think you look shit,
Yeah,
you know,
literally.
you have to do it, you know, so you can build it up at that point. I think it's important to forewarn your clients how much harder it's going to be in those later stages.
Yeah, for sure. And it can be used as an expenditure tool as well, can't it? Because like you say, you can factor it into a day. And if they're doing X amount per week, X amount of posing sessions, you know, you can put that against what you're doing with the cardio, with the training, and with the deficit as well in a bigger picture. And I think that as well, you know, as coaches, it's important for us to be able to, when we're being sent check-in photos and when we're communicating with athletes, to give them pointers and try and help them as much as we can, you know, direct them to the website of the federations and things like this. Having a posing coach, you know, it's all really important because, like you say, it's a night and day difference when you see people on stage and if they know the posing and also the stage presence and the confidence that comes with that.
Yeah, so even though I don't specifically do the posing coaching for my female clients, they still have to send me posing videos because I can see the progress. So I know if somebody is at 6 weeks out and at a certain level, whether they need to increase the posing and book in more sessions with a coach. If I'm not seeing progress week to week, then I can call them out on that. But also you need to see how someone's physique moves. So many people rely on just front side and back photos. And actually that's not the full picture, you know, and I think so that's important to make sure you take that video from people with the quarter turns and you can feed back on it. And then I do give about a lot of little tips on how they can make that look better. You know, because I've been at a lot of shows.
You're like, so put your arm here.
Yeah, exactly.
But it is hard. The posing is hard. And I definitely found, coming from a background of not doing anything like this, when I first got into bodybuilding, the first lesson I did was with Audrey KPO.
Oh yeah.
And I literally was like, oh my God, it was like a boot camp.
Yeah.
And I left there shell shocked thinking, I don't know if this is for me, because it was like, it was proper, you know, it was hardcore.
Yeah, she aims to either make or break you in those camps, doesn't she?
Yeah. But actually all of those lessons, like I've had various different posing lessons with different instructors and
not many have that attitude.
yeah, and it builds the foundations of, you know, when you are a bit tired and you're thinking, oh God, do I have to do my posing practice? You think, yeah, you have got to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You've got to have discipline with that, just like you have in everything else. And the one thing you can say about this sport is it gives you discipline.
Yeah, for sure. It changes people's whole outlook on life. You know, I went into bodybuilding with that sort of, I guess I wanted to be able to control something, because you know what it's like in life, we can't control much. And when you come from sort of hard childhood and things like this, you know, you're thinking, I'm a bit lost. And then bodybuilding almost was, it helped me find myself, if that makes sense. And, you know, through this whole journey, it's all of these things, it builds the resilience, but it crosses over into normal life skills. I'm sure you found that as well.
Oh, absolutely. I wouldn't have been half as successful in my businesses if it wasn't for the fact that I can be so meticulous. In fact, I've had discussions with people, you know, who've asked, you know, how I built the coaching business to what it is. And when you talk them through it, something that often gets said is it's bodybuilder mentality. And that's what I have in my business. I start work at exactly the same time every day. I have my meals at exactly the same time every day. I do my check-ins on the same days. Like everything is broken down to meticulous detail. Like if somebody wanted to assassinate me, it would be very fucking easy. Like everything's done at a certain time, you know, right down to the structure of my working week. When I do accounts, when I do admin, when I do X, Y, Z, like it is broken down to that level because that's what we're used to doing in order to get things done, you know. And if it wasn't for the lessons and the discipline that I learned from doing those preps, yeah, it never would have been the same. And I think, you know, when two bodybuilders get together, they often have that similar mindset, and it's a pretty unique thing. But if you can get through that and still manage a job or whatever else is you're doing, then you know you can pretty much do anything.
Yeah, for sure. So when you sort of have people come to you for coaching, and if it's someone that's never competed before, but they've maybe got that sort of, the seed has been sown, as it were, and they're looking to compete, I know it's going to be on an individual basis, but is there certain conversations that you have with them in regards to, you know, what bodybuilding takes?
Yeah, so with me, we have a consultation before I'll take anyone on, and they have to be the right fit. Now, that people sometimes think that means like, I want to see what the physique's like, or whatever it may be. That's not the case. I don't care if somebody's competed 10 times before and they never want to show. That's not that doesn't matter to me, because there's too many bad coaches out there, and if they've not been coached by me, then they might have done things the wrong way. Quite often is the case. I've taken on lots of people who never want to show, and then they've won every show. So that's that's not the case. It's not about their physique. It's about their mentality and whether they're willing to follow a plan. Now, even down to the point of if somebody's trying to manage the inquiry stage with me, saying they want to meet face to face, or they want to do this, that, and the other, and they want to do this in this scheduled time. I'm like, you don't sound coachable, I'll be honest. Like you need to be able to follow a process, whether that's from first inquiry through to consultation, I just get a sniff of that sort of thing, or whether that's like once you're in the coaching program. And what I always say to people is you have to earn a prep. You do not just, come to a coach and you dictate when you want to compete, where you want to compete, all that sort of stuff. We get started and I see how you respond to coaching. And that is with regards to like following the plan, being meticulous with everything, showing me that you can follow this long term. And that comes down to being able to understand your food swaps, how to walk into a restaurant and order off the menu. If you can't do those things, then I've got nothing to give me an indication that you can do this for 6 months, 12 months. So you have to be able to see that you can be meticulous with these things. And then we need to see somebody's physique changing. And then I tell them whether they've got what it takes and the timescales and where they'd suit. And it comes that way around. And when we do it that way, people practically always get a trophy. But you've just got to be, meticulous with that. So it's not about vetting people, because there's a lot of coaches, they'll only take people on if they're already at a certain standard. It's like, oh yeah, well done, mate. They were already winning. Yeah, exactly. So what excites me is taking somebody who's competed multiple times and never got a trophy, and we get them a trophy, or competing multiple times and they always come top 5 but not really anywhere, and then they win, or they've won categories but not got a pro card. Those are the people that truly excite me. It's about how much you can transform a physique. As a coach, that's what inspires me. And that comes down to lifestyle clients as well, because people don't realize these lifestyle clients. I won't work with anyone unless they want a high level result, but if you want to lose 20 kilos, that's exciting. Like
I know. God, I couldn't believe when I got on the scales this morning, it was 24 kilos. I mean, it's crazy, because also with off season and that phase for females, it's something we talk a lot about on the pod. Some coaches say a certain amount of weight you should gain. Some coaches, go with how you look over a certain period of time over an off season. Sometimes it's a limited period of time. Sometimes people can have, a couple of years in an off season. So there's lots of different variants to that as well, which, again, I think a coach should be really informative off the back of a prep. I've already spoken to my coach about what we're looking at for off season, and I haven't even finished my first competition yet. But
that's what I said about the result when you step on stage and what color trophy you get doesn't change that at all. Because I'm not judging because I'm not necessarily but where the improvements need to be. There are improvements that need to happen, even if you get the best possible result. But there's no generic answer. People talk about how long does it take between categories, but the thing is, it depends. So I often say, if it's your first show, you can probably compete at the back end of 1 year, and then you can jump on stage April sort of time the next year, and a shortish off season is probably enough. If you've competed multiple times over a few years, you're probably going to need at least a year. And if you've competed for longer than that, you're probably looking at 2 years or more. But then you've got other things that thrown into it, because you've got to look at how much more meticulous could I have been with that prep. But really, nobody should be getting on stage unless they've been meticulous with that prep. If somebody's not been meticulous during the cut, I'd rather pull them from the show. But I don't pull them from the show, because we don't start a prep until they're already meticulous. Don't fucking start a 12-week cut in a wing and a prayer that this person will follow a plan. They have to show that they can follow a plan. Then you've already got that in place. Then there's also things like, well, are you going to add assistants that you weren't using before? In which case, that can shorten the length of the off season. So or like, were you just looking for more condition? If you're just looking for more condition, then you potentially need to come up, fix your metabolism, come back down again. You don't need a huge off season, but if you need more muscle, then So there's a load of caveats there, isn't there?
Yeah, and also, like you say there, if someone's changing categories, to say, I know people that have gone from bikini to figure, it might be that going down the assisted route would be more on their radar for something like that as well, and the longer off season combined to then move up a category. And then again, that's exciting, if they've competed in one category and they want to move up, as it were, in regards to being more peeled and more muscle, it can be a really exciting dimension to the journey.
Yeah, totally. The thing is, when it comes to moving categories, it has to be based on the changes in your physique. Too many people, they have an ideal category that they'd like to compete in, and they think they've got a God-given right to walk on stage in that category. You know, some people, like, for instance, the most common one is the girls, they have an ego about whether they should be in bikini or not. Well, I'm sorry, that's the amount of muscle you have. So if you want to compete in figure, brilliant, but you need to take a couple of years about it. And it's only when they start cutting down that they start realizing you were right in the first place, and they do need more muscle, because most people massively overestimate how much muscle they've got and underestimate how much body fat they've got. And that's guys and girls. And that's why quite often, not within my program, because I'm pretty good at predicting that and telling them, but generally speaking, in the gyms, you'll see lots of people, the guys who enjoy filling out a big t-shirt, start cutting down to compete, and they, you know, they flatten out before they start dropping body fat. They, you know, drop a little bit of body fat and they're flatter, and they then just look like a smaller person, but they've not yet got that pop to their physique, and they back out of the show because they're massively disappointed. And then they say, oh, I lost too much muscle. Right? No, you didn't lose muscle. You didn't have that much in the first place, mate. You just lost your intramuscular glycogen, your water, you lost a little bit of body fat, and, you know, and that's who you are.
So, it is a shell shock, isn't it? Because until I did my first diet, I thought, oh yeah, you know, everyone's got muscle, and I'd never done any weight training. And I got down to my stage weight, and I was literally like a bag of bones. And I look back now and think, holy shit, you know. And something else that I try and promote as well is, if someone is keen to compete, but you know, they've maybe never done anything like this before, I say to people, why don't you do like a photo shoot prep?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, first of all, see if you can adhere to it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, is you've got to do it in a fun way as much as possible before you add that pressure. You've got to have some idea of what you're going to bring to the stage, and you've got to build your confidence as well. Like, photo shoots are a great opportunity to make you realize you belong, because most people, you know, they're looking at photos on Instagram of people that are highly edited photos taken by professional photographers or on stage in that final physique, which, you know, you shouldn't be looking for too much out of peak week, but it does work, and it does change the physique quite a lot. You know, so looking at something like that and then comparing themselves, and obviously you're going to look at that and think, holy fuck, how can I do that? You know, whereas if you do a photo shoot and actually just peak for that a little bit, do a little bit of a peak week, and just make sure you're looking at your best and the correct lighting and stuff, then essentially, you know, then you can look at those photos and think, actually, I do belong, and actually I can do this. And you can either do that in the run up to a show, so you know, or you can do that instead of a show and then consider a show afterwards.
Yeah, because you can always do, like, you know, one that you potentially be 6 to 8 weeks out from. And then if you can adhere, if you enjoy it, if you're feeling good, you can then carry on. Or you can go into an off season to work on if you can see what improvements needed, and then do a prep, you know, the following year maybe.
Absolutely. And I run photo shoots all year. So I do, well, 3 shoots a year with my clients. And that is the purpose of it, just to give another level of motivation. So you're either celebrating it as an end goal. So it's, you know, celebrating a transformation they may have made or whatever, or it's to build confidence as they go into a show, or it is instead of a show to decide whether it's for them. And yeah, they're a great tool to use that, you know, not enough people do use.
Yeah. It's interesting you say about peak week as well, because I still, even now, I've done so many peaks, but it still amazes me how much your body changes. That pop that you mentioned earlier, when that comes, you're like, is that me?
The thing is, when I say that, so that it's not going to fix a broken prep. So if you've not adhered and you're not at the body fat percentage that you should be at, you are not going to fix that in the final week. And in fact, the only time the peak week is super effective is when you truly are lean. When you're truly lean, that makes a massive difference, that peak week, like a huge difference. But they're not even the peak, because the people who are truly lean look at themselves a week out and they're like, oh, yeah, I look amazing. This is great. I could walk on stage tomorrow. And that's when you're ready. You know, when you're a week out from your show and you look in the mirror and you're like, I could walk on stage tomorrow and I would be perfectly happy. That is where you should be. And then from there, then we make some changes and it's exciting. The people who, and those people aren't that bothered about peak week, but the people who are the most bothered about peak week are the ones because they're not lean enough. And you're not changing that by dropping a little bit of water off you, you know, whatever it may be, filling your muscles out. So that's you know, so yeah, it's interesting, but you can make a vast difference, even in the last 24 to 48 hours, big changes, and that's exciting. But the problem is, for that to be done correctly, you need a very good coach who's very experienced, because a lot of people think there's some, you know, standard protocol, and there isn't. You know, I think a lot of the time with regards to the peak, it's more of a sort of coach's eye than it is a formula, you know, because there's different ways of pulling water off somebody. There's different ways of doing all of this. And it's about looking at that athlete. And some athletes are massively muscled and they can look way better coming in slightly flat and very fucking dry than they are coming in, you know, super full. And if people like the perfect peak, no, you choose it based on that athlete, on the amount of muscle they've got. If they're a little bit under muscled, you need them as full as possible. And you may have to sacrifice a little bit of dryness, right? And if you've got somebody who's got loads of muscle, you can come in as dry as a bone. You know, and this is why people like Dorian back in the day was so hard and dry because he had so much muscle. And these days people are coming in with much more fullness, you know. So but you have to also know the federation of which look, because those two bodybuilding looks are very different. And different federations like different things. So you have to understand the client, you have to understand the federation and the category, and, you know, in order to make those decisions.
Yeah, for sure. It's been really interesting this prep actually, because I've got a different coach. I've known Tom, who's my coach, for a few years now, and then I came away from my previous coach, and then he offered to coach me, and I took the opportunity, and we've done some different peaks this year. And one of them was, which is something Joe has come on the pod and spoken about, is a bit of fat loading at the start and then going into the carb up. And then we've done it where we've done more carbs for on like 3 days out, and then drop the carbs a bit, and then show day. And then we've done it where we've just done the day before, we've done just more carbs. So it's quite interesting because it's different federations that I've competed with as to how we've done the peak. And like you say, the coach needs the experience to be able to do that.
Yeah, totally. You've got to look at where the athlete is. Sometimes you need to maintain the deficit a little bit longer. And you know, the good thing about the fat loading phase, if you want to call it that, is that you're obviously removing carbs. So what that does is pulls water out, because obviously water follows carbs, and, you know, so glycogen. So it's going to dry that person out for you to then fill them out later. So it's a good tool for that. But really all you need to bear in mind is you need to fill out your intramuscular glycogen and fill out your intramuscular triglycerides. And whether they're doing it as a fat load at the beginning, or whether, you know, the day before the show you pull carbs a little bit and whack up fats to fill out those triglycerides, just at some point you need all the carbs, and some point you need all the fats. The thing is, you need your triglycerides, you need your glycogen, and you need your water, and that's the key thing, and some sodium obviously. But there's different ways of doing it, and I'm the same. I've done it differently with different clients depending on where they're at. And the fun thing is when you get somebody truly lean. So I don't know whether you were fully lean for the first show or whether it took a few shows, but the leaner you get the client, the more aggressive you can go on those loads, and that's when it gets really, really fun. And you know, yeah, I love the peaking process.
Yeah, I love it as well.
There's different ways of stripping water out of a body. You can, you know, keep water stable and reduce salt a little bit. You can keep salt stable and reduce water a little bit. Use diuretics. There's a bunch of different ways of pulling water out of the body. Essentially, you know, you need to choose which tool you're going to use. The problem comes mostly, well, firstly, if you reduce sodium all the time completely. So that's, years ago, people weren't monitoring sodium and they're just taking it all out, and that is a recipe for the problem. But it's like if they use a diuretic and they reduce water and they reduce sodium, all of a sudden they flatten like a pancake. It's like game over. So yeah, this is the problem, that more people damage their physiques like that than fix it. So if you've got an unexperienced coach or a client or an athlete with no coach, they should just keep it all the same and make sure your bone, you know, it's absolutely diced, and you're going to look good pretty much whatever you do. The funny thing is, in the last few hours of the day before a show, if you're truly lean, it's quite hard to fuck that physique up. You know, like you can eat. Like,
oh God, then that's verging on post show as well, isn't it? I mean, as a coach, that's something that I'm quite passionate about, in trying to sort of educate people before that, because, you know, that dump and that ghrelin effect, and, you know, suddenly when your last show of the season, I mean, I speak from experience, and this happened multiple times before I was able to control it to a certain degree, in regards to, you know, not just eating everything in sight, because you're never, well, it feels like you're never going to be satiated again when you
you're not, because your ghrelin's always switched on. You know, your leptin's fucked, you know, so you know, your body never realizes it's full, and it's always telling you you're hungry. So literally, and it's just a matter of time and how aggressive you've been as to how long it takes for those things to fix themselves. And, you know, when you've had that high level goal of stepping on stage in next to nothing as your motivator for not, you know, following your cravings, when you remove that goal, people think that they're going to be able to go back to the level of motivation they had before they started competing, but you don't, because at that point you know, just living day-to-day life in a fairly lean physique was enough of a goal. But when you compare it to getting on stage and your leptin and your ghrelin are fucked, you've got very little chance. So you do have to fully understand it. And it's another reason why you're better off moving through the federations. You're better off starting off with a prep, but you don't have to go into quite as deep, severe a calorie deficit. Now, if I'm getting somebody on stage for two bros in figure, or even bikini, or we're looking at a fitness category, one of the other federations, it's like, you need to understand, you do need a lower calorie deficit. You need you need to increase that, the expenditure that little bit more, and you need to reduce the energy input that little bit more. That is going to have a more severe effect on your hunger hormones, which means you are going to struggle that bit more at a later stage. So if you do your first ever show and you are looking for glute ham tie-ins, separation between your quads and hamstrings, separation underneath your delt as a female, and you're going to have to go deep on that, and you're not used to coming back from a low level of deficit, you're not going to be used to coming back from that. So it's another reason why you're better off doing a category where you don't need to be quite so lean. You're not looking for the tie-ins. Yeah. And that means you get used to coming back from it. So you've got a few shows and a few seasons to show that you are capable, because there is nothing worse than seeing 21-year-old girls, and it might sound sexist, but they're the ones I see primarily on, who stepped on stage at 50 kilos. A week later, they are fucking 6 to 10 kilos heavier. And they've made so many plans with their friends because they've had to avoid social events at an age where lots of people are socializing. Yeah. They've made plans for the weekend after, the Friday, the Saturday, the weekend after. And what do? They pull out of those social events, sit at home and cry and fucking eat, right? Yeah. Because they do not look like the photos that they're posting on social media just 1 week later. And it's so upsetting to see. So I'm the same. I have videos in my lab teaching people about every aspect of the prep, teaching people why not to get food focused during the cutting phase, why we have to be meticulous with following our plan, because one of the reasons some people follow such an aggressive calorie deficit is because they weren't following the plan in the first place. So then you end up playing catch up, which is why I'll pull somebody rather than go deeper into a calorie deficit. Although I don't often have to do that, again, because the setup phase is right. And it's why you have to educate people way before they get to the show day on what's going to go on with their body, why they shouldn't book a holiday a week after a show. Like, people think, oh, it's a great idea, I'm going to be in great shape.
I'm going to let my hair go.
Yeah. So, that's, all things that people need to be educated on before they enter it. And it's too many coaches focus just purely on getting to the stage, winning the trophy, and then brilliant, they've got their photo of a client with a trophy. Meanwhile, when that client is at home crying, they ain't there, so
it's scary. And of course you've got to push your body weight up. You can't hang out as stage lean.
But realistically, it depends on the category as well. In some federations, the bikini girls ain't that lean. Yeah, you can maintain that. Don't be fucking kidding yourself that you've got to some crazy level of condition that cannot be maintained. Now, you obviously, from your face, I can tell you have. But for some federations, there's people walking on stage not that fucking lean, right? Sure. And you don't need to add tons of body fat. In fact, you probably wouldn't want to. There's people walking around day to day leaner than some people are walking on stage, and then they're telling themselves they need to increase their body fat levels. No, you don't.
And it's that mentality of, I've done a prep, so I deserve to eat. And again, that's something that I try and sort of, we can all feel that I guess you feel sorry for yourself sometimes in prep. You wake up feeling like shit, you go to bed feeling like shit. And as we know, because we've done it, multiple times, and you sort of know what to expect. And when you're a first timer, and we do get quite a lot of first timers listen, they're not armed for that effect to happen, and they just don't. It's really hard to digest those feelings. And you've done your show, and it doesn't matter what your placing is, your goal is then removed, and it's like, shit, what do I do now? And they've
got to see the end point as a month after the show. They've got to see that as the end point. And they've also got to set, there's terminologies like, when can I go back to it? Normal eating. Well, what the fuck's normal eating? You're not a beef burger. You know what I mean? When you say normal eating, what do you mean? You've also got to bear in mind that if you're creating a large calorie deficit by eating smaller meals, you're also having less cheat meals or no cheat meals. So you're having less calories in general. You're also very active with regards to your steps, doing a lot of cardio, and you're training hard and doing a lot of it and being consistent with all those things. Don't expect to increase the amount of cheat meals you have a week. Increase the size of the normal meals you're having as well, and the calories in those, as well as reducing your cardio and reducing your steps, because you all of a sudden just flipping that way on its head. You have to choose where you put your calories. So it's like, well, do you want more cheat meals, or do you want bigger meals, or do you want more frequent meals? Where do you want it? Because we can't give you all, you know, that takes the time to build up to that. So it's deciding that, or where do you want to adjust your energy expenditure? You can't go from all that cardio and all that steps to none, you know, so you have to keep some in. And it's this expectation, and then not realizing the effects of those compounded things of increasing portion size, increasing cheat meals, increasing all these things. Because I've had people at shows saying to me, how long do you think I can eat for before I start gaining fat? As a heavyweight bodybuilder, right? You have massively probably depleted your glycogen stores, and even after a decent carb load, probably still got a level of glycogen depletion. So they can smash a lot of carbs still days and days after show, and they're just going to fill out even more
and look better.
So that guy, yeah, he can probably eat, or like I used to prefer to go in a little bit flat because I don't want a big waist. You know what I mean? So I quite a few days after a show, I could eat and eat and eat, and not much effect. But a bikini girl who wasn't quite lean enough anyway, with like not even, you can have a cheat meal tonight, but then you've still got to pretty much maintain maintenance calories, and your maintenance calories are reduced because your metabolism has slowed down from the work you've been putting in. So yeah, don't expect to be able to binge for a week. And they're the kind of lessons people need to understand.
Yeah, and like you say there about, you know, when you remove the steps and remove the expenditure or reduce them, you know, that's something that Tom and I have spoken about because I have him buying Clen, and he said about keeping a low level of Clen initially after my show, just while I'm, because of course it acts as a bit of a hunger suppressant as well. You know, it's not a case of doing the show and then pulling everything, and then you know, you just don't know what to do with yourself after a show half the time.
Yeah, exactly. And I think so. Reverse dieting, I'm not a fan of that phrase, because the word diet implies calorie deficit. I don't believe after a show you should be in a deficit. You should actually be in a surplus pretty quickly. The problem is, to create that small surplus is still quite, you know, it doesn't mean you can do loads. You know, you should as quickly as possible be wanting to fix your hormones, fix all of these things that's going on. But don't think that that means high food, low expenditure when your metabolism is on its arse, your hormones are fucked, like your thyroid's probably not working at its best, you know, like all that sort of stuff. And so yeah, absolutely, you've got to choose what you add in when you add it in, and you know, using some of those tools can be effective. Because the other thing is, if that you know, Glenn was holding water off your body, and then you take those out like that, and then you add in a load of salt from cheat meals, carbohydrates, like don't drink enough water, you're just going to go.
Yeah, this is something as well, you know, I speak with people about maintaining loads of the, you know, like keeping your hydration up, because of course when you have, you know, your off-plan meal the night of the show, whatever you're going to have, and then normally the next day I'll go for some food as well, and depending on, because I'm at this point where I'm experienced with it, I can sort of, I know how to negotiate it, and I can fast in between and things like this to enjoy some meals. But when this is a first time experience, you know, you don't know what to do with this, and then of course your fluid intake drops off a bit, and you think, oh, I'm going to have this week to just, you know, get my bearings and whatever, and then like you say, steps reduce, you're not doing your cardio, you might have some rest days from the gym, the body's like, what the fuck, for 6 months I've been doing all of this and now nothing, and I'm fucking starving.
Yeah, totally. The thing is, you're going to be as well, because the thing is, you have some rest days from the gym. Training is actually, you know, it actually releases appetite suppressants because of the cortisol that it releases. So actually, that's one of the reasons why people's rest days, they're twice as hungry as they are on the non-training days. And quite a lot of people reduce their energy input on a rest day, and they don't have that appetite suppressant. So it's the same after a show. As you know, I do believe in, especially the level of condition you've got recently, you should take some rest. You let your body recover, but you are going to be starving.
It's a really weird thing, isn't it? It's like on the peak as well, you always think like, oh, I'm going to be full when I do my peak because you're going to have some carbs. But of course it's from, I don't know about you, but normally in my peaks with both of the coaches I've had, it's like white rice, some oats if it's a couple of days before, and then that gets pulled, and it's pretty much rice cakes, rice, jam, you know, things like that. And your body just inhales it, and you don't feel, but if anything, you feel more hungry.
Yeah. Oh, that's during the carb load is one of the times when I'm most likely to cheat and eat extra carbs. And it's pretty common, you know, like, you know, I say cheat, I set my own carb loads, but it's like I do the maths, you know what I mean? And then I'm like, you're just ravenous. Like your body will burn through that fast, you know.
Yeah.
And so don't expect that to be like I love the foods because I used to put a little bit of oil in, make my sweet potato wedges into I love the foods that I used to have in those loads. Like it's basically just chips all day, absolutely amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, you could eat like 1,000 calories, sorry, 1,000 grams of carbs, and you're still hungry.
Yeah. And you feel like it's such a weird feeling because I'm always like, I've done 6 months of all of what goes into a prep. And then on those couple of days before, I feel knackered, hungry, I'm eating more, and you pull the train in or it reduces, you do some pump sessions or whatever. And you think, I feel more knackered now than this whole prep.
Oh, it's exhausting. Those carb loads, if you've got a lot of driving planned, there's plenty of times I'd have to like pull over and have a sleep, like during those carb loads, like horrendous. Yeah. So you need a driver for that.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, I think this episode is going to be super cool for the listeners because we've covered quite a lot, but also, like we said before we jumped on, it's about keeping it real and actually, giving information and for people to relate to that. Because I don't know if you've got a lot from podcasts yourself, but I used to listen to them in prep, and I used to listen and think, wow, there's people like me out there that are finding this really hard, and it would help me just that little bit more to get through a prep as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love podcasts. I think you can learn so much from them. You have to be a little bit careful about taking tidbits of information from here and thinking you can glue multiple strategies together. It's a bit like when people see someone eating a pizza the night before a show, but they don't know whether they're taking aldactone and all the rest of it to strip that sodium out. And then they try and implement a strategy themselves and wonder why it didn't work for them. Or somebody might have been eating 5 guys every week through a prep. So you've got to be very careful of picking and choosing. But as a coach, when I understand most of the protocols and I can see someone's protocol and how they created that look of an athlete, it absolutely fascinates me. And I love, I think it's great that so much information is being shared. I think it's like, you've got to just absorb as much information as possible. But then I'm a big believer in getting one piece of advice from one coach. Like you must have learned so much by talking to so many different people here, but it's dangerous to then think you can implement it with your coach's strategy.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm always like, someone actually asked me a couple of days ago, would you ever stray away from what your coach said if you think it would be better to do it in a different way? It's a no from it. Like I'd never be able to do that. Like I just wouldn't be able to do that. If I'm being coached by someone, their word is gospel, because they know, normally if you've got a good coach, your best interest is at heart for them, and they want the best for you. And it's just a case of executing. Like you said right at the start, when you consult with someone, if they're trying to negotiate with you, it's not a good sign, because are they coachable?
Exactly. So once you get somebody to that point, and it's your job as a client to make sure you make a good decision with regards to your coach. So ask them questions. Like we have these consultation calls and I'm like, find me some questions. Like I like to be challenged, but the reason I like to be challenged is because I can answer. I can give you, like I do group Zoom calls with my clients and I'm like, throw some shit at me. Like in the one-to-one check-ins, obviously you don't want to get too detailed into why we're doing things, but your coach should be able to answer that. So that's why I encourage that stuff in the group Zoom calls. So you can ask me why we use a certain protocol, and I can tell you the science behind it. I can back it up with studies if there are any, and I can explain to you exactly why we use something. But if you've got a coach and they're using a fat load process and you ask them a question about it and they can't answer that, they're just taking that from someone else, implementing it. They don't really know why they're doing it. And I think that's important. So it's your job as a client to vet your coach and make sure they know their shit and make sure they're taking people from exactly where you are to exactly where you want to be. Not just that they, have achieved this themselves, that they've done it for other people systematically time and time again. But then once you've made that decision, it's done and you trust them entirely.
Yeah, for sure. Like I really do. There's a lot of weight behind what you said there. I really do believe in that, because it's well and good, going for a named coach, or your friend does that, or your friend, but you've got to find a coach that works with your schedule, that works with your goal, and it's bespoke to you. I'm really passionate about trying to get away from this cookie cutter programming and just being almost a number on someone's books, because especially going for a prep, like the implications to, like we touched on earlier, health and hormones and all of those things, it's a big thing. It's not just something really that I think people should just jump into. So to have the right coach is so important.
Yeah, totally. And they've got to be willing to change the plan, like, I've got ideals and optimal processes we'll take, but if somebody's not able to do that, you need to understand it enough to make adjustments and change things, things like the PED use. If somebody does have a bad response to androgens, what else you can do in order to get somewhere, you need to be able to change a plan. And if you only have one protocol and it's that template, and it's that way or the highway, then you need to be adaptable as a coach for that individual.
Yeah, for sure. So if there was anyone listening that was interested in coaching, or if they wanted a consult, do you do consults for like PED use and things, or is it more clients you take on?
I only do it as a full package. We do everything. It's training, nutrition, accountability, support. I've got the education portal, over 170 videos. Like, unless they're willing to invest in their own education and learn about this stuff, I'm not willing to just give them a basic plan that they can follow, as long as, because I don't want somebody who doesn't change their food sources. I don't want somebody who doesn't want to learn about it. I want the geeks.
Yeah. I want the full package. So if someone was interested, is it best to go via your Instagram, or have you got a website?
Yeah, so we've got the website. I've not updated it for about a year and a half. So there's loads of transformations and loads of results that we've had since then. But obviously, I've been doing this 7 years, so there's still loads of results on there. But yeah, go on the website. You can read about my experience. Click a consultation call button, and fill that in, and then we jump on a call. Or they can just message me on Instagram. 9 times out of 10, if they message me on Instagram, I will ask a few more questions, because I don't want to get on a call unless I think somebody is semi-good fit, so I ask a few questions, and that's good for them as well, so they know they're jumping on a call knowing that I think this person might be right. Again, it's not about genetics. I can take I've never said no to anyone based on where they're at. I'll take on a 50-year-old mother of 3, or I'll take on a 21-year-old, but as long as they've got the right mindset. And I don't judge them based on their current physique. I judge them on what their mindset with regards to how coachable they are.
Yeah, I love that. Being a coach is so fulfilling when you get the right people. And sometimes you just get that, I guess, that initial spark, and you understand that this is something they are going to commit to. And it's such a nice thing to share that journey with them. But you're right, if someone's not coachable, it becomes difficult as a coach to be able to, because people bash coaches, but they don't sometimes think about, actually, sometimes it's the client. So yeah,
if there's a client being bounced around a load of coaches, and I know that coach is a pretty decent coach, I mean, I don't make too many judgments, but like, it's interesting. But yeah, I'm not much. Well, I was going to say I'm not as much of an arsehole as I might come across. When the time is right, I will be an arsehole. I'm sorry. I would rather lose a client and make the right decision for them than to people please. I think that's important as a coach. That's about integrity.
Yeah, and it's so important. It's something that we unfortunately do lack a little bit in the industry at times, but it's something we can still cheer. And there's people around us that are of the same, cut from the same cloth, as it were. So yeah, it's just trying to get that out there, and people being vigilant when they are hiring a coach. And like you say, looking at testimonials, speaking to their clients, even speaking with multiple coaches and seeing who you prefer, see how they work, and if it works for you. When you're hiring someone, it's about building a relationship, isn't it?
And this is the thing that's sometimes underestimated. I coach a lot of girls. We talk about the toilet and things like that. Through peak week, as we're going to have to talk about some pretty intimate things of how you can encourage yourself to go to the toilet. And if you're not comfortable with that human being, then you're going to struggle with those conversations. And it's the same across the board. Things like sex drive can have an impact on someone. Somebody gets a new partner, and all of a sudden they're shagging all the time. Calories.
There's so many things, though, isn't there? Like, when I first lost my menstrual cycle, at first I was a bit like, I don't know what to do, and then I was comfortable with my coach and I spoke to him. But it's stuff like that, and like you say, going to the toilet, it is a thing. When you're running a deficit for a long time, it could be a few days and you're thinking, am I okay? So I always as well try and say to people, if you can get a coach that you're able to ask questions, because you know what it's like. You don't just want a one-word message back. If you're like us, we want to know why, what, who, where.
I literally have in my forms, what is your digestion like, menstrual cycle, that sort of stuff. You've got to lead the client, because most people won't lie about it, but they won't necessarily bring it up to you.
Yeah, because they don't know to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
They don't know what warped world they're going into.
Yeah, it is, yeah. Well, it's the tanning process. Once people go through that tanning process, you lose all inhibitions. It's like, this is like, yeah, fuck it. No one's shy after that.
Yeah, I love that. But when someone's doing their first competition and they're like, we have to get naked. And I'm like, you just got to do it.
Yeah, it's the harder thing is bringing back the inhibitions afterwards. I was talking to somebody the other day, and I did a photo shoot, and the photographer had a set of gold leggings. I didn't think twice about it. I like, I bang them up. Did the photograph, and I was just like, "Yeah, physique looks good," and you could see my quad sweep and everything. Posted the photo on Instagram, and everyone was like, "Holy fuck!" Like, and I was like, "Yeah, I've lost all like concept of what is normal now. It didn't even cross my mind that."
I think that's probably why we secretly quite like this, Charlie, because it's not normal, and we like to be the people that are away from the norm.
Yeah, I stopped trying to fit in a long time ago.
Bodybuilding's good for that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So on Instagram, you're just at Charlie Garforth.
So it's at Charlie Garforth is my personal page, but it's not personal. It's all about coaching.
Yeah.
And my business page is Pro Physiques.
Okay, cool. So if anyone wants to reach out, or if anyone wants to see your client journeys and just be a bit more involved, then they can follow you or book a consultation if they wanted to go down that route. So thank you so much for your time. It's been awesome.
I've really enjoyed it. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, super cool. I'll have to get you back on one day as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll think of another subject.
Yeah, love it. Thank you, mate. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
See you later.
See ya.